Yo, what's up, everybody? This is your boy Logan here, and we are getting ready to get started. Are you secure? I'm super excited. Listen, man, any questions that y'all got, please ask. Today, we're going to be talking about the attachment style we're going to be talking about is the anxious attachment. Super excited, like I said, to be here with y'all, man. We about to get started. And we about to get the ball rolling, man. I'm super excited, man, to be talking and working and all of those different things. So let's get started, man. All right, y'all. So I gotta get this. Hold on. How you flip your camera around? My bad, y'all. Hold on. Flip your camera around. Ooh. Flip my camera around. Flip my camera. Okay, there we go. All right, there we go. All right, y'all. All right, y'all. So we are talking about attachment styles today. What we're going to be talking about is the anxious attachment style, is the attachment style we're going to be talking about today. Let me I'm going to do it sideways. It's all good. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to talk about the anxious attachment is what we're going to talk about today. I really want to talk about that, give y'all some game. And we're going to get right into it, man. Again, I'm excited that y'all here. Like I said, we're going to talk about the attachment style. We're going to talk about the anxious attachment, what that looks like, what does that mean, different things like that. I hope y'all can see okay. If you can't, let me know. Put it in the chat or whatever. And then if there's questions or anything that y'all got to ask me, please put it in there and I'll make sure I get it answered. So, all right, y'all, let's get into it, man. So we're going to talk about the anxious attachment. If this is your first time here, we're talking about attachment styles. What that means, what that looks like is attachment styles are how you act, right? Like how a person acts in a relationship, how they act in friendships, how they act, you know what I'm saying, when they're handling conflict and different things like that. And so attachment styles overall, right? Like what it does or what it talks about is that you have some people that there's 4 attachment styles. Some people say there's 5, but for the most part, most people believe that there are 4 attachment styles, and those 4 attachment styles are the secure attachment. The next one is the anxious attachment, which we're going to talk on today, which is the preoccupied. The third one is the fearful and avoidant, which is disorganized. And then the last one is the DA, which is a dismissive avoidant. And so with that, like I said, we're talking about attachment styles and whatnot and what it looks like and how to, you know what I'm saying, of course, handle it and different things like that. So let's get into it. So again, we're talking about the anxious attachment style. In the world's population, there are 10 to 20% of the world's population, they have an anxious attachment style. I'm going to say it one more time in case y'all don't get it. 10 to 20% of the world's population, they are an anxious attachment style. So, what is an anxious attachment style? You're probably asking, right? So, an anxious attachment style, we're going to touch on the core beliefs. We're going to touch on how it shows up, and then the origin and nuances, and then some of the systemic cues that may happen when you're dealing with some type of tension or conflict or something like that. All right. So, core beliefs, when it comes to anxious attachment, they say, I might be abandoned. I need reassurance to feel safe. Also, a deep fear of abandonment and a belief that love must be earned or protected, which shapes core beliefs, behavior, and emotional reactions in nuanced ways. So, at the foundation of things, when you get a person that is a anxious attachment style, at the core of things, their belief is that, yo, I may be abandoned. That's their core belief, right? Is dealing with abandonment of some sort, the fear of abandonment, the fear of someone leaving them or whatever the case may be, right? So how it shows up, let's talk about it for a second. I'm gonna use this chair. Hopefully y'all can still see me. Nope. Still can't see me. Dang, I thought the chair was gonna work. I guess not. But anyways, so how it shows up, let's see here. I just got to, okay, so how it shows up, guys, is it shows up by overgiving, people pleasing, a hyper vigilance to tone and distance, right? So you have some avoidance, and I'm talking about the anxious attachment, but you have some anxious avoidance that it's not what you say, but how you say it. You ever had somebody say that to you before? Or you ever heard someone say that before, right? It's not what you say, but how you say it, right? So they have a hyper vigilance to tone and distance, right? People pleasing, overgiving. However, let's talk about something, right? How does it show up emotionally? Because you get people with an anxious attachment style, and with that anxious attachment style, they've heard, yo, you're too much. Yo, you're too much. You're too needy and different things like that, right? Here's how it shows up emotionally when you're dealing with the anxious attachment style. Emotionally, intense fear when there's distance or conflict. Mood heavily tied to Yep. Okay. So they have an intense fear when there's distance or conflict, right? So if there's any type of distance or conflict, so like for example, I dated a person that was an anxious attachment. When we would have any type of conflict, right? Because I was a fearful avoidant, I would give her the cold shoulder, right? And so with that, with me giving her the cold shoulder because we would have some type of conflict, right? And of course that was my trauma speaking. However, when I would give her the cold shoulder, she would have an intense fear when there was distance, right? Me giving her the cold shoulder, I'm removing myself away from her. I'm not drawing close to her. And so another thing with the anxious attachment is that they seek reassurance a lot. So they need reassurance to feel safe, right? For example, I'll give you an example. Like, you ever had someone that you were dating or someone that you were dealing with, and it's like every 30 minutes to an hour, they are, do you think that I'm pretty? Do you like me? Do you really want this to work? Do you think that I'm sexy? Like, they ask those things because they need reassurance because of internally their anxious attachment makes them feel that like they overthink, right? With an anxious attachment, they overthink. They're overthinking texts. They're overthinking your tone. Like, yo, why did they say this? Like, hey, you told me that you were going to be here at this time and you were at this place and different things like that, right? So they listen to what you say, right? Not how you say it. Y'all with me so far? All right, cool. So emotionally, intense fear when there's distance or conflict, mood heavily tied to how relationships feel in the moment. So with that, they just go by, their mood is based on how the relationship is going in the moment. I'm gonna let that marinate and sizzle in your spirit for a second because somebody just missed what I just said, right? Emotionally, they have an intense fear when there's distance or conflict, and their mood is heavily tied to how relationships feel in the moment. All right. Cognitive, let's talk about that. How does it show up cognitive? All right. So, overthinking texts and tone, replaying conversations, jumping to worst case scenarios about getting rejected or replaced. All right, listen, I'm trying to tell y'all, this is how it shows up emotionally, cognitively, even behaviorally, right? Like, how does it show up in their behavior when it comes to an anxious attachment or an anxious avoidant, right? So, cognitive, overthinking texts and tone, right? Replaying conversations, jumping to worst case scenario about being rejected or replaced, right? When it comes to different things like that, and you deal with anxious avoidant, again, remember I told you, the world's population for anxious avoidant attachments are 10 to 20%, right? Their core belief is, yo, I might be abandoned, right? So overthinking texts and tone and replaying conversations is something that they do. That's in their actions of how they do things when they're starting to feel some type of tension, or they're starting to feel, anxious and different things like that. They're going to overthink the texts. Like, yo, like, why did they say this way? Why did they text me this way? Did they not care? Different things like that. Like, they're going to overthink. Okay. Behavioral. So how it shows up in their behavior: constant reassurance seeking. They need like, they're going to seek reassurance daily. Not like, you get some people that, you have some people in this world that they don't need reassurance every single day. Not a person with an anxious attachment style. A person that has an anxious attachment style, they're constantly seeking reassurance, right? They also have a hypervigilance to micro changes. So any slight shift in your tone, right? If you're not responding back to texts in a timely manner, right? Clinginess. They're very clingy, right? Very, very clingy. And they have difficulty being alone. So when you're dealing with an anxious attachment, they're very clingy. They have difficulty being alone, but then they're constantly seeking reassurance from the person that they're dating, right? So what that looks like is that if you ever had a person that you're like, yo, like, they always want me around, they're texting me every 5 minutes, and if I don't tell them, like, yo, I'm busy, or hey, I'm taking care of something, then they're going to start getting anxious, like, oh, they're going to abandon me. Oh, they have the fear of abandonment, like, oh, they're going to replace me, or they're leaving me, and different things like that. And then behavioral, like, another thing with, behavioral for an anxious attachment or anxious avoidant, whatever you want to call it, they have a hypervigilance to micromanages. So yes, they love consistency, but there can't be any micro adjustments or changes. Like, you're going to need to communicate that to them. You can't just automatically, yo, we're going to do something different, we're going to do something else. It's going to mess their whole mood up, right? Hypervigilance to micro changes, slight shift in tone, right? So let's say you're talking to them on the phone. Like, I remember, again, I was dating a person that was an anxious attachment, and when I would pick up the phone, like, most of the time, when early on, like when we were dating and talking and stuff like that, she thought something was wrong with me, because she said, oh, you sound so dry, and you sound so defeated and low, and you don't sound happy to talk to me. And I was just like, yo, like, that's the farthest thing from the truth. Like, I enjoy talking to you. Like, I enjoy it a lot. So it was I used to scratch my head a lot, because I was like, yo, like, what? Like, so I need to change my tone, or I need to change my delivery? Like, what do I need to do so that way, or you feel like, okay, I know Logan cares about me. And when you deal with an anxious avoidant, right, what happens is that they have a hypervigilance, like I said, to micro changes. So any slight shift in tone or slower replies, like, I can remember, like, she would text me, and if I didn't respond back within 10, 15 minutes, she automatically thinks that something happened. She automatically thought that, oh my God, you're leaving me, or oh my God, like something happened to you, or whatever the case may be, right? Origins and nuances. So the reason why most people that are anxious attachments, again, 10 to 20% of the world's population are anxious avoidant. However, the origin and nuances of what happened on why they became anxious is because inconsistent caregiving, right? So their caregiver was very inconsistent. Like 1 minute they're loving on them, and then the next minute they're pulling away from them, right? Then the next minute they're loving on them. Then the next minute they're discarding them and ignoring them and neglecting them and different things like that, right? So you can see how that would cause a person to be anxious, right? And so with this, I was telling someone earlier today, we were talking, and I was telling them, I was like, yo, like, you know what I realized on why we have these different attachment styles, or why, we have this trauma and different things like that, is because of the simple fact that we had parents. You have some parents that didn't deal with the trauma that they experienced. So when they had a child, it transferred to the child. My God, that's good. That's why it's called generational curses. That's why it's called generational wealth, right? Like, if you can pass it down from generation to generation, it can be transferred, right? So the same way that we are trying to create generational wealth out here is the same way on how we are causing generational trauma to people, or to our kids, or to our kids, or even to ourselves. Like, it's passed down, it's transferred. It got transferred because there was somebody that didn't want to deal with it. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow. I know it is, but it's something that is needed, right? In order for us to really make the change that we need to make, in order for us to graduate to the level that God has called us to, we got to be real with ourselves. And me, I'm gonna be transparent and vulnerable with you, straight out. So again, inconsistent caregiving, limited co-regulation. What that means is that you never had enough time to regulate your nervous system. Right? Like, if I'm talking to someone right now that you may be an anxious attachment, or avoidant, or fearful, or you may just be avoidant altogether, right? What happened is that when they needed to regulate their nervous system, they never got enough time to do so. So that's why you have a person that is an avoidant in some degree, is because they had a limited time when it came to regulating their nervous system. They never got enough time to regulate it. I hope that makes sense. Unpredictable emotional climate, right? Difficulty receiving care. I'm gonna touch on that too. That's gonna be good, right? Unpredictable emotional climate. Like, what that looks like is that when there were moments where they wanted to share out, right? Like their emotions, or hey, I need you to show up for me like this, or hey, I'm having a dance recital at the school. Can you show up, right? It was unpredictable. So the fact that it was unpredictable, do you know what that does for a person when they're dealing with unpredictability? They're going to make sure that they avoid any type of conflict, because unpredictability does not regulate my nervous system. Peace does. My God, that's good. All right. So unpredictable emotional climate, right? If and I'm talking to someone, if you've ever went to someone, whether if it's your caregiver, whether if it's the relationship that you're in, whether if it's the person that you're married to, whether if it's a friend and you all have a friendship, or whatever the case may be, has there ever been a moment where you've shared with someone and they didn't make you feel safe? Right? Like, I can talk about, there was a moment in time, again, I'm talking about the anxious attachment, right? There was and I'm talking about myself, of something that I experienced, but I want to share something with you all. So I can remember, and we're talking about the avoidant part of the attachment, right? Remember I told you all I was a FA, I was a fearful avoidant. So with that, I can remember dating an anxious attachment, right? The anxious avoidant. And I remember her saying to me, like, hey, Logan, like, it's okay for you to be vulnerable. It's okay for you to be transparent with me. This is a safe space. I know how to do those things. Like, you don't have to worry about it. I've been here before, like all of those different things, right? So I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna allow this person to be who they say they are. Because as a fearful avoidant, I used to have a bad, I used to do a bad job. I used to do a very bad job of not allowing people the opportunity to be who they say they are, because I have to hurt you before you hurt me. Does that make sense? So back to what I was saying. So he said, hey, Logan, I can be a safe space. You can be vulnerable with me. You can be transparent with me. Share these things with me. I was like, okay, cool. We were sitting on the bed one day, and I had told her, I was like, yo, like, I'm in love with you. And she bust out laughing. Now, granted, her laughing, at least this is what she said to me, or what she communicated to me, was that her laughing was a defense mechanism because it caught her off guard, or whatever the case may be. Now, me as a fearful avoidant, I shut down and put walls up around myself because my abandonment got triggered. And my abandonment got triggered because of the simple fact that this was a moment in time where I was being vulnerable and transparent and allowing my heart to be heard, and it wasn't received well. It actually hurt. Now, granted, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do it again," and all that. But for me, it was like, yo, the damage is already done, right? And so with that, that's where the unpredictable emotional climate, right? That's where that comes into play. I was saying all of that to talk about the unpredictable emotional climate, right? Also, with the anxious avoidant, they have a difficulty receiving care, right? Like, if you've ever had anxious avoidant person, if you've ever been in a relationship with them, or a friendship, or whatever, what you will notice is that a lot of avoidants are they are the ones that people come to when they have a problem. I know y'all probably like, bro, no, that ain't true. I promise you it is. Most avoidants, they are the person that everybody comes to. And I'm gonna tie it into why it is that, right? And I'm gonna tell y'all this in a second. But I want y'all to remember that, right? Difficulty receiving care, right? So they are the person that everybody comes to. So remember that. Hold that, okay? Hold that thought. All right. Sensitivity to criticism. They don't like being criticized at all. They're very sensitive to it. Like, they will avoid it at all costs. I promise you they will. I ain't telling y'all nothing I read on Google. I'm not telling y'all nothing on a YouTube video I seen. I am telling you from experience. I promise you. Sensitivity to criticism. You cannot criticize them. You criticize them, be prepared for their anxious attachment to start going crazy. Flat out. All right. Some systemic cues when it comes to, so like body language and different things like that, when it comes to a anxious attachment, is they will have a tight chest. And so body language, right? For my people that are an anxious attachment, or they know that they are, or whatever the case may be, I want you to pay attention to your body language, right? So tight chest or throat, right? So the chest or the throat may get very tight. Shallow breathing. They do not, their breathing is very shallow, all right? Knots in the stomach. That's a huge one. The woman that I dated that was an anxious attachment, she used to say that a lot. Like, yo, I got knots in my stomach. Something just ain't right. All right. Restlessness. They don't rest a lot. This is another thing. Again, the anxious avoidant that I dated, she didn't sleep a lot. She was only getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep. Like, that is a sign to let you know that they are anxious, right? So restlessness, right? Inability to sit still. She could not sit still for a very long time, right? People that are anxious attachments, they cannot sit still for a very long time. All right. Shoulder tension and seek reassurance. When you're dealing with an anxious attachment, guys, remember they are going to always seek reassurance. I need y'all to hear me on that, okay? And then one of the things that I learned is that I forgot the other part. I got to do the other part. My bad, y'all. So another thing that I learned is when you have people that have the anxious attachment styles, they deal with people that have, dealt with trauma or, anxious attachment styles. We dealt with a lot of different things. And so with that, what that looks like is they dealt with some type of injustice or, something along the lines of that. Okay. So let me do that. Okay. Hopefully that worked. All right, cool. And then let's zoom in on this. Oops. Okay. All right, let's go here. Let's lift this up here. All right, y'all. All right, let's finish. Let's close it out. We actually almost done. And actually, I need to charge my phone at the moment because I cannot afford for this to go dead. All right, y'all. Hold on 1 second, y'all. I'm charging, putting the phone on the charger. It's just me by myself in the crib. So thank you. Let me get that done. All right, cool. I think we good. All right, let's get into it. All right. So real quick, a person that is a anxious attachment. Another thing that I didn't share. Well, actually, let me do it this way. Okay, let me do it this way. So I learned last year, I want to say, I think it was last year sometime. I started learning about like how to reparent. I read this book about how we can um, reparent ourselves internally from the things that our caregivers or our parents did to us, or neglected us in a way, and different things like that. And so understanding that, I came across some information that I was like, yo, this makes all the sense in the world, right? Like it explains it explains why some people are the way that they are, right? And I'm not saying that they can't change or anything like that. Like what I need you all to understand that is that if you're dealing with a person that has some type of avoidant attachment, whether if it's a dismissive, whether if it's fearful, whether if it's anxious, I need you to understand that that is not a that is not an end all be all for them, right? There are some things that have to take place, right, in order for them to leave that area to become a secure attachment, and we'll talk about that later. Actually, when we talk about the secure attachment, we'll talk about that. I'll touch on that. However, there are some things that have transpired for them, right? So I want to say this to you all. All right, so from 0 to 3, we dealt with when we were babies and we came out of our mother's womb. From 0 to 3, right? Like there are studies that show that there are opportunities across the timeline of a kid's life where they can make a drastic change, right? And so for the first 7 years, if you don't know this, I'm going to share it with you. But for the first 7 years, like 0 to 3, we deal with rejection. We deal with unworthiness and burnout from 0 to 3. The next thing, ooh, sorry, y'all. All right, sorry about that. All right, so 0 to 3. Sorry, they was sending the little shelter things or whatever, the public service and public safety alert, because it's frozen out here in Nashville. It's crazy. All right, so 0 to 3, we dealt with rejection, unworthiness, and burnout. At 3 years old, we form attachments. At 4, we deal with humiliation, shame, and self-doubt. At 5, we deal with wounds of betrayal. And then from ages 6 to 7, we deal with wounds of injustice. So high stress, very critical, high standards for self and others, right? So those are things that help us build the foundation for the attachment that people take on, right? So like if you deal like a person that deals with an anxious attachment, right? That has an anxious avoidant attachment style, they probably dealt with some type of injustice or rejection or different things like that at a very young age from their caregiver or their parents, or whoever it was that took care of them. All right. Another thing for avoidance is that most avoidance, they do shallow relationships. I'm gonna let that marinate and sizzle in y'all spirit for a second. I'm gonna let y'all think about that, because I know some of y'all are probably thinking like, "No, you lying. That ain't true." Okay. Most avoidance, the reason why shallow relationships work for avoidance is because they feel safer. Avoidance they regulate themselves through distance. That's why they like doing long distance relationships, right? Because with that, it's less emotional demand, less nervous system activation, right? Distance protects anatomy and control. No need to rely on someone who might disappoint or overwhelm them. And then connection stays in their head and not in their body, right? So shallow relationships don't meet avoidance needs. They protect them from having needs. My God, that's good. However, here's some of the trade-offs for avoidance that do long distance relationships, right? So what that looks like is less anxiety, less depth, repair, and mutual support, loneliness, inside connection, relationships that stall when vulnerability is required. Okay. And when they're healing, right? When they're transitioning and they're going from being an anxious attachment to healing, what that looks like is they learn that dependence equals loss of self. They can tolerate graduated intimacy, and they move from low stakes connection to secure independence. So most avoidance, the reason why they do shallow relationships is because they can regulate through distance, right? Like they don't have to lose the control of the anatomy. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So let's talk about the patterns real quick. We got about 25 minutes. But I want to talk about the patterns, the red flags, which are behaviors that harm others, their survival signals, and then I want to give you all some tools. And if you all were with me last week, then you know the questions, right? So there's 4 questions that I'll ask, but I'm also going to share them with you all. I'll share them with you all tomorrow. They'll be posted at 7 p.m. Central Time. So you all can take those journal prompts and those questions, and you can start journaling and start working on yourself in your anxious attachment style, or fearful and avoidant attachment style, or whatever your attachment style is. You can start working on those things so that way you can become better in relationships and friendships and just overall in your life. Okay. So patterns. Here are some patterns when it comes to a anxious attachment style. Strong fear of abandonment and rejection, often worrying others will lose interest or will leave without clear cause. Another pattern is that they have a negative view of self with a positive view of others, leading to idolizing partners and devaluing oneself. All right. The next one is intense emotional high and lows in relationships with anxiety spiking around conflict, silence, or ambiguity. Okay. The anxious attachment is the fear that distance means disappearance. I'm going to say it one more time for the people in the back. The anxious attachment is the fear that distance means disappearance. So each attachment style, when it comes to the avoidance side of attachments, they all have some type of fear, right? With the anxious one, it's the fear that distance means disappearance. With the fearful and avoidant, um, what for them it means they crave connection but they fear it, right? So intense closeness with sudden withdrawal. So they will do the intensity, right? They do the you have a fearful avoidant that does the push and pull method, right? And will come in super hard, right? But then they'll pull away when there's some type of conflict of some sort. Okay. The question for the pattern for anxious attachment, it says, what do you start doing more of when you're afraid of being left? What do you start doing more of when you're afraid of being left? Okay. Red flags. All right. So let's talk about red flags. When we're talking about red flags, we're talking about the behavior that harms others, not the behavior that the other person harms you, but the behavior that you do harms that person. Does that make sense? You with me? Okay. So a red flag that harms others, right? Excessive reassurance seeking, guilt-based communication. Like when I say guilt-based communication, it's like, well, if you love me, you'll do boom, 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 boom. If you care about me, you'll do blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense? All right. Over functioning as control, right? So they're doing a lot because at the end of it, they're trying to control everything. All right. Fear explains your actions, but it doesn't excuse the harm they cause. So what I'm saying to my anxious individuals, what I'm saying to them is that understand that when you have those moments where you are triggered and you're feeling anxious and different things like that because of your fear of this person abandoning you or disappearing on you or whatever the case may be, I need you to understand that your anxiousness, right? Like you can be fearful, but we can't excuse the behavior behind like what actions or what steps you took or what part you played in the equation, right? And the harm that it caused that individual. Does that make sense? Are y'all getting what I'm saying? I hope so. All right. My question, it says, when my fear of being left drives my behavior, who actually feels the impact and how could I respond differently? So again, let me say it one more time. When my fear of being left drives my behavior, who actually feels the impact and how can I respond differently? When my fear of being left drives my behavior, right? So the like when you have that moment of being fearful that, hey, listen, I'm gonna get left, what actually feels the impact and how can I respond differently? Like, how can you respond differently? So instead of you having that anxious avoidant attachment and wanting to discard or wanting to leave the person or you wanting to do a disappearing act on them or whatever the case may be, what could you do differently? And I get it. Listen, I understand some people you don't care enough. I get it. You ain't gonna do it. That's cool. All right. I ain't talking to you. I'm talking to people that really want to make a change in their life. Right. So I'm talking to the people that want to be the best version of themselves. Those are the ones that I'm talking to. Talk to them, brother. All right. Survival signals. All right. So survival signals. Hypervigilance for abandonment. All right. Hypervigilance for abandonment. That is a survival signal when it comes to an anxious anxious avoidant. Okay. Emotional escalation. You get some anxious attachment individuals that, they will make something out of nothing. Like, you can be like, yo, I'm chilling, ain't nothing wrong, everything is good, and they make it out of something, right? Like, emotional escalation, it just goes from 0 to 100 real quick. All right. Also, a survival signal is that they have a difficulty with self-soothing, right? So remember last week when we talked about self-soothing for one of the tools for a fearful avoidant, we talked about the breathing exercises and different things like that, right? So when a anxious avoidant is triggered, they have difficulty with trying to do self-soothing. And I could tell a story on that because I remember I was on the plane, and I had an experience with that. So they have a difficulty with self-soothing, right? So your nervous system learned that love could disappear at any moment, so it stays on high alert, trying to prevent loss. Yeah, I know, y'all. I know. I'm at somebody's front door. You ain't got to tell me. Let's go to the question. The question says, when my body goes on high alert in relationships, am I responding to the present or the fear of losing connection? I'm gonna ask the question one more time. When my body goes on high alert in relationships, am I responding to the present or the fear of losing connection? Okay. Number 4, we're gonna talk about tools. I'm gonna give you all some tools that you can use, and then I'll give you the question, and then we'll close it out. And then if there's any questions or anything that anybody has, please put them, you know what I'm saying, on the live or whatever, and I'll be sure to respond to them. All right. So here are some tools when it comes to an anxious avoidant. If there's an anxious avoidant that's watching this and you're like, yo, how can I get better? What can I do to regulate my nervous system? Like, I want to be the best version of myself. Here's what this looks like. All right. Number 1, journaling. That's the first thing. Number 1 is journaling, right? Journaling is very, very important. And you're probably thinking like, well, why is journaling so important? Well, journaling is so important because it gives you an opportunity to really write down your thoughts, write down what what you're dealing with, what you got going on, different things like that. Also giving you a chance to really share those thoughts and what you're feeling, you know what I'm saying, internally, and different things like that. So that is something else. So I just want to share that with you all. All right. So the next thing is journaling. I'm sorry, self-soothing, right? So self-soothing, remember I told you all last week what self-soothing looks like. Put your hand on your chest, put your hand on your stomach, take a deep breath in, 4 seconds in, hold it for 4 seconds, release for 4 seconds, right? That's a really good thing to do, like breathing exercises and stuff like that. Journaling, again, your thoughts. Using I statements, that's another way, right? Because sometimes with an anxious avoidant, what happens is that they start while they are unraveling, they are thinking that you're gonna disappear. And when they're unraveling or when they're having their moment where they're triggered, it's always you, what you did, how you said this, you don't care, you, right? So when it comes to them trying to regulate their nervous system, they need to use I statements. I feel anxious. Can we have a moment to talk about this? Can we table this and talk about this later? Right? Like, you need to be able to name the emotion. And in order for you to name the emotion, you got to use that I statement because you got to take responsibility. Okay. The next thing is, here's the quote. All right. You are not needy. Your nervous system learned that love could disappear, and now it's just trying to keep you safe. You were not needy. Your nervous system learned that love could disappear, and now it's trying to keep you safe. All right. The question that I have for you is, when you feel anxious in connection, do you act on the fear or notice it first and respond differently? I'm going to say it one more time. When you feel anxious in connection, do you act on the fear or notice it first and respond differently? All right. So again, this is our anxious attachment session for today, for this week. We talked about core beliefs. We talked about how it shows up. We talked about, and when I say we talked about how it shows up, we're talking about from an emotional standpoint, a behavioral standpoint, as well as a cognitive standpoint as well. The origin and nuances, we talked about that. We also talked about the systematic cues, right? Like how your body is feeling when you're feeling anxious and different things like that. Then we talked about the patterns. What are some patterns of an anxious avoidant? Like, what does that look like, right? Red flags, the behaviors that harm others. Like, what am I doing that's affecting this other person when it comes to my anxious avoidant attachment style? All right. Survival signals. That's another thing, right? When you have a person that's in survival mode, this is what it looks like. And then what are some tools, right? You got to give tools. You can't just talk about the problem and then don't give any tools behind it, right? So we want to make sure we give some tools and different things like that. These 4 questions will be shared tomorrow. I want to make sure you all understand that and know that. And then the last thing before we get up out of here, let me make sure I do this real quick. Hey man, make sure y'all go to the website, shop Y.B.Normalgear.com. Y'all can purchase this book. Again, this is a book on self-esteem. It's called Normal Scares Me. It's one of my favorite books. As you all know, I used to deal with very low self-esteem. And so if you have a child or someone that deals with very low self-esteem, this book right here will help them a lot. And it's a very good book. And then this last one, which is a very good one as well. It's called 50 Ways of Y.B.Normal. And so with that, I want y'all to see that 50 Ways of Y.B.Normal. Y'all see that? Y'all see that? Y'all see that? Check your boy out. Y'all see that? Yep. All right. So 50 Ways of Y.B.Normal. What I did was I took 50 synonyms and antonyms, and what I did was I put Y.B.Normal in the front of it, or I put YB in the front of it. And then what we did is that we took those words and then we told a story behind self-love, faith, courage, overcoming adversity, like different things like that. And so what this book will do is that we left a space for the supporter to be able to share a moment where they had to overcome adversity, or, their faith was tested, or they dealt with some self-love, or, there were some things that they had to be courageous on and different things like that. So I want to share this with you all. You all can go to the website at shopYBNormalGear.com. Y'all can even go to the website to get a shirt if you want. Y'all see the YB Normal t-shirt? Y'all can get y'all one of those as well. And if anybody's interested in wanting to learn more about attachment styles, send me a DM. If not, you can show up next week, next Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time. And we're going to be talking about the dismissive avoidant. This one's going to be real good. This is going to be really, really good. So, yeah, man, I appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all coming. I appreciate y'all coming and rocking with your boy. I just appreciate y'all showing up. I got to make sure that, I show up for you all and do my part. So I really appreciate it. I actually thought that this was going to be a lot longer, like last week, but it wasn't. So I'm proud of myself because I stayed within the time constraints. So when my team sees this and y'all see what time it is and what time I went off, I need y'all to congratulate me for real, because your boy did his thing. You feel me? But anyways, yeah, man, we talked about attachment styles. We talked about the anxious attachment. 10 to 20% of the world's population are anxious avoidants. So of course that is a huge number when you think about it, between 10 to 20%. And then fearful avoidance, they are between 5 to 10%. And then when we talk about the dismissive avoidant and we talk about the secure attachment, as far as the world's population, y'all are going to enjoy that. So as always, man, I appreciate y'all. And thank you for coming on here. I'll see y'all next week. Again, are you secure? That's the question I got to ask you. And in closing, like I always say, why be normal when you can be extraordinary? Love y'all.